Good evening. This is Colleen again from the Sherburne Public Library, and this is our third book talk. We've got, again, Mike Tefft, a local author, and Brian McDowell, who is a local publisher from Log Cabin Books. So welcome again to our talk. Tonight's topic is working with editors. So I guess I'll start it off with a question. I know there's a couple types of editing, different ways to edit or kinds of editing that can be done on your book. So maybe one of you, Mike, Brian, I don't know, can give me some insight on that.
Sure.
Mike?
I'll go. One type of editor is a developmental editor. That editor would work with you as you're writing your book, or maybe even after you finish the first draft, and that editor would be more focused on the content and theme and all of the sort of nuts and bolts of the actual story. Then you have more of the line editors, which is probably what a lot of people think about. The people who do the proofreading and correct your grammar and punctuation and spelling and even usage. I think those are probably the biggest two buckets of editing types. There are probably specialties within each of those groups. What do you think, Brian?
No, I think that's pretty good. I wouldn't go too far beyond that. There are certainly specialties among editing, but I think if you look at it from the standpoint of a line or grammatical editor and a developmental, or sometimes called a thematic editor, I mean, their title will not be thematic, but that's what they're really doing. That pretty much covers it. The interesting thing about being an editor, and most people who've had to edit anybody else's work know this, is even if you start reading for content and understanding, pretty soon your pen's going to be out if you're reading hard copy, and you're going to be changing a typo or correcting some mistake that got past the author. So it's hard to divorce the two. But the best editors, I think the best editors, in my opinion, will read for theme first and worry about the typos and the little other errors later on. It's hard not to do both at once if you've done a lot of editing.
Yeah.
But that's the basic. That's the basic too.
Yeah, I could see that. What kinds of editing have you had or been experienced, Michael? I'm sorry.
Me? It's mostly the line editing has been most of the work that I've had done for me. I do try to go through my manuscript several times. I think the last book I've probably went through 6-7 times before I got it to the editor. And then even after I went through the editor, she made all of her suggestions, I incorporated them, I still went through one last time and just make sure everything was, at least from that point of view, was set. And if she also did point out a few story inconsistencies, because I'd asked her to do that, although her primary focus was the line editing. But I shored up a couple things there, and that's been my experience. I would love to have a developmental editor earlier in the process, but that's people get paid to do that, and then you have to have the money to pay them for that. So
well, I will say, Mike, that if you started a series as you did without a developmental editor, you might not find that one would serve you well on the second or the third book. The simple reason being that it's putting constraints on your characters and your plot that didn't exist to begin with. So you might end up with a book that you're not happy with, or with changes you were not happy with.
Yeah, I could.
So I go ahead, Colleen.
No, I was just going to say, I could see having an editor from the beginning in some ways would be a good thing. But I could also see, depending on the editor, it would be kind of frustrating in some ways because I would feel like they were inhibiting maybe my creativity or my idea of what the story was going to be. But that's, I haven't done it, so I don't have the experience, but I'd be worried.
Sure. I think a post editor is the kind that you would want to have, Mike, and the kind that would serve you the best. So I hope you won't let anybody squelch the voice that you started so effectively with the first. And we should mention again what the series is, the Reluctant series. Do you want to talk about that briefly, Mike?
Yep, the Reluctant series, the 2 books, The Reluctant Captain and The Reluctant Agent, both available at the Sherburne Public Library and available through ebooks through the Sherburne Public Library. So you can get them there. Of course, you can also go get them at most places ebooks are for sale, if you're so inclined.
It's a really good first book, and I think the second book is going to be exciting. The third book will be I should say that the third book is going to be exciting. The second book exists, and I think that the part of it that is most impressive to me is the soulness of the voice. The fact that, as you said in our first conversation, that you wrote the book you wanted to read. That's what makes it, I think, a really good series. Somebody's phone going off. I want to mention that. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy because most people would think that if you submit to an editor a manuscript that includes a lot of grammatical mistakes, is really has a lot of grammatical problems and typos and that kind of thing. But it has a good theme and plot and is substantive, then I think you have a better chance than if you hand in something that is grammatically perfect and bland or uninteresting or poorly constructed. And most people would think that, well, if I show them my typos, they're not going to be interested. The reality is, if you show them an imperfect document that has a good plot or a good construction, shows a good outline of a story, and shows, I think most importantly, differences among characters, then they can always clean up the typos and the grammar. Some of the best writers in history were terrible grammarians and really poor with sentence structure, but they still got by. I had one author in particular who had a lot of grammatical challenges, but had a really good sense of plot, was great at writing different personality types, great in writing conversation, which is a real art. And we were able to make it work really well. So while you might think that your grammatical problems are going to cause you to lose maybe a contract or lose a publishing house, it's more likely to be problems in the plot. It's very common. I think I said before that a new author will write every character with the same kind of verbal tics and the same kind of language as every other character. And it's the author's voice, but they don't realize they're imposing it at every character. You don't do that, Mike. You write every character as a different person, and that's because you thought a lot about how would they speak, what would they say, what words would they use. You don't use the same adjectives, you don't use the same exclamations, and that's really important. And a good developmental editor will help you develop that.
Yeah, that's true. So we sort of answered, well, maybe not. What do you look for in an editor? I mean, we kind of went over some of that. Is there more detail on that, or anybody?
Mike?
Well, I mean, since I'm looking at more line editing, I look for somebody who has, good skills in line editing, and many, well, almost just about every editor that you would look to hire will usually do like a page or chapter, or a small section edit, so you can get a feel for their work and what it is they're how well they do things. In my case, in the last book, I made a conscious decision to use English British spelling in the book, since it all takes place in England ish. I wanted to I wanted that as part of the style of the book, and so I actually hired a British editor who ironically had to switch gears because she'd been doing so much American editing that now I got to remember how to do this with British.
That's cool. I know
You were happy with that experience?
Yes. I was going to say, I did have one. There was one time I had to override her, and that was it. I had the word focused. We would say FOCUSED. The British spelling has two S's. And I just looked at the corrections like, that looks like a typo. And I went back and looked and no, that's the British spelling. But man, that is going to look like a typo no matter what I do. So I also did a little more digging and found that the single S is also acceptable in British English. So I kind of overrode her on that one because while American authors are used to seeing things like, OUR instead of OR, or changing an IZE to a IS, that one was just going to look like a typo no matter what I did. So,
Right. And I'm sure she expected that. I think those kinds of things are common, but the other thing is you can overrule a developmental editor too if you're self-publishing. You can't always do that if you're not self-publishing, but if you're self-publishing and they are suggesting something that hits at the very core of what you're trying to do, you can always turn them down. The process between any editor and any writer has to be fluid, and it has to be inclusive of what both people want. But ultimately, it's the writer who decides, who's empowered to say yes or no to what is suggested. There are editors who are heavy-handed and who are frustrated writers and are really just about writing their book over yours, and that can be difficult. They don't usually stay in the industry too long, but they do exist, especially at the local level. If you're asking somebody who's an amateur editor to edit your piece, I always try to assure my authors that I'm not looking to change their voice, that their voice will emerge from whatever we do together. And once they know that, and I usually send them a few paragraphs or even a chapter of my edited version of their work, so that they can confirm that I'm not changing the world. I'm just looking to make what they're doing better.
That makes sense. That would be much more comforting to be able to get pieces as it comes along, so that you feel confident with what's happening. So how do you find a good editor? What's the process for that?
Well, there's lots of different ways you could do it. I will just say I got lucky because it was a friend of Colleen's who was an editor, and that's how I got connected to her. There are curated places where you can go and look for editors. I know one good resource that I know of is called reedsy.com. That's REEDSY.com. They have a lot of resources for independent authors in general, not just editors. They do cover designers. They do might even do narrators for audiobooks. I'm not sure about that, but they cover a lot of different services that you might need as an independent author. And they're all, I do know they all go through, you know, an extensive vetting process there. Now, that will not be cheap.
Right. Yeah, you can often pay an editor more than the rest of the publication will cost you, even if you're self-publishing and self-printing. So you
Yeah.
have to be careful about that. There are a lot of resources. One of the best resources that's underutilized, I think, in a lot of different um, disciplines, and this will sound like it's a paid a paid endorsement. It's not, but if you're a LinkedIn member, and I'm a non-paying LinkedIn member, I have a free account. There are so many different groups of professionals that you can find there, and different referrals. And there are a lot of independent publishers and writers websites too, and all you have to do is Google independent writing or independent publishing, and you'll find them. But on LinkedIn, you'll find everything in the publishing process, from layout and design, you know, getting a excuse me, getting a printing consultant, to thematic or developmental editors, or grammarians, pardon me, and they're all in different disciplines. They're all in different groups, so you can go in there and tell them what your project is, and somebody there will know someone who can help you out. And then, Mike, like you said, it's just a matter of what you want to pay, because you can pay as much as you want to. I generally tell authors who are in that situation to offer a work for hire situation, wherein, and work for hire means you're paying someone to do something for, in this case, your book. And once they're paid off, that's it. You might throw in an edited by line in your book, but there's no sharing of any kind of residuals or income. So work for hire, I pay you, you do your part of the process, and then you're out. So you definitely want to make that clear. But instead of saying edit my book for X dollars or whatever per page, just say edit my book for this number. And what that editor will do is, when they reach the hourly rate whereby they've done all the editing they can do, they're done. They step away. Usually they're pretty good about extending that to the whole book. But if you set a per page, or you allow an editor to set a per page price for editing, you're probably going to be really disappointed in how much you have to pay. There are always freelance editors who are willing to do what you want them to do for the price you want them to do it for. If it's 200 pages for $500 or whatever, then, but try to take control of that part of the process early, because a lot of them have their own sense of what they want to charge, and they might be open to putting that aside if you're willing to say, I just need a quick edit on this, or I just need one run through a developmental edit, and then walk away from it that way. So that's LinkedIn is a good resource for that. And the other thing I'd mention is agents. You may not want to work with a literary agent in your process, but there are some benefits to working with an agent. An agent will actually help you. They'll tell you if your book has, in their opinion, marketability, and they'll tell you ways that you can focus on certain things that might help you in the book. But they'll also refer you to editors and publishers, and they'll maybe even make your case for a publisher to take on your book. But anybody in the business of publishing knows the essential people. So working within something like LinkedIn or Reedy, or one of those sites that actually focus on the people who are doing the work, is really helpful. And there are so many of them that I can't just recommend just one. But you have to be guarded, and I think Michael will agree with this. You don't want to go into it not knowing what you want that editor to do.
Yeah.
You want to take control of the situation by saying, this is what I need from you. And if they offer more and it's for the same price, great, but don't let them direct your process. That's really important.
Yeah.
Now, if you're working with the publisher decides how it gets edited. But if the publisher's working with you, that means they probably already signed a contract with you, so you're home. But there's something about being independent where you can decide how much of your voice gets changed, and that's kind of neat, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Um, uh, Other questions? What else? What else can we talk about on editing? Sure, you guys have more.
Mike, I talked last time about how oftentimes when the author thinks his or her work is done, the editor thinks it's just beginning. Um, and I don't know if you've sensed that at all in the process that you had with the British editor you worked with, but talk about the long process of writing again, just to make people clear on the fact that you have to be in it to win it.
Yeah. In some ways, although you wouldn't think it, the actual first draft is kind of the easiest because you're just trying to get everything down. Now, I mean, with the work I've been doing lately, you would think that was the hardest step, but really, like you said, it's like you get it all down. What I typically do is I let it sit for a little while, a couple of weeks, maybe a month. It kind of depends what's going on in my life. If I manage to finish it up near the end of the year, I might wait till after New Year to fit, just because of the holidays and stuff. But then I will start going through. First, I typically will do like one pass through to try to fix the obvious spelling errors because I'm a horrible typist. And so I'll just, okay, first while through, we'll run spell check. Just let's get the easy stuff done. Then I typically will print it out. I still like to print it out and read it on paper and make notes on paper as I'm going through at least the first time. I don't do that very often because I tend to write big books, and even it's not very cost effective to print it out very many times. So, but I usually do at least one pass with a hard copy and notes and the dreaded red pen, and try to go through it. Then I'll look to see where I've got, if I've got obvious incomplete sentences or thoughts where, maybe I was in the middle of, I thought I wrote down what I was talking about and I just jumped to the next thing. I'll try to fix that stuff. And then it's kind of just a continual refining process. So it's kind of almost like sculpting. You start out with this big block, and your first round is hacking off the big chunks till you get something that's vaguely like what it is that you're trying to make. And then your tools sort of get finer and finer as you keep going through it. You start, okay, so this chunk is a head, so now I'll smooth that out, and this is the body, and I'll smooth that out. Okay, now then you start going and checking all the details and gradually refining through that. And as I said last time, when I get to the point where I can't stand looking at it anymore, I kind of feel that's where I think I've done everything that I can do because I just can't see it anymore. And that's where I would then go, okay, somebody take a look at this and see if this is any good, because I've lost all rational ability to discern anything. So that's typically, I would send it to some beta readers to read through it, listen to their comments. If there's anything that needs tweaking, I'll tweak that, and then probably one more pass to send it to the editor, and then the editor does their work. We incorporate the work back into our stuff, and then like I said, I do one more pass, and it's amazing. One of the dirty secrets is even as many times I go through things, and as many times as the editor goes through things, because I know my editor, as she did each section, went through it 3 times. Each section 3 times. I've heard after the fact that we still have a typo somewhere, even though, so many people have looked at it. It happens, and it happens in professional publishing as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. A couple things you said that really struck me, Mike. And the first one was the first thing you said, which had to do with
I think he's hung up.
journalism students, that if they were working on um, a feature story where they were not strictly on deadline, that they should put a draft away for at least 24 hours, maybe 48 hours if they could, because once they read it after that, it was almost as if they were reading it for the first time. The problem comes in when you're writing something, as everybody knows, that if you're revising and you're revising and revising, you miss things because you're skipping over it in your mind, because mentally you're still thinking of, it's still too close to you. An interesting thing that works really effectively, and it's a very old tool, I'm really going old school now, showing my age, is if you want to read strictly for typos, read the manuscript backwards, because it removes all sense of context. You're just focusing on the words, and it really works. It sounds silly, but it really works. You find things really quickly if you're reading one word at a time backwards, from the back of the book, in effect, to the front. Give that a try sometime. It'll drive you crazy, but it really is effective. That comes from the days when... Go ahead.
I was going to say that's a good idea too, because typically, when you start at the beginning, and that's kind of the freshest, and then you sort of lose the enthusiasm as you go along. So
Right.
the beginning gets edited the most of anything, and the ending gets edited the least. So starting backwards,
Yeah. Well, and I mean literally backwards. Read it backwards. Read the end of the sentence, and then it sounds crazy, but you'll catch things really easily.
I bet.
The other thing is that the process is not as important as the person who you're engaging with as an editor. It's not a bad thing to establish some kind of, I wouldn't say personal relationship, but get to know the person who's editing your book and give them some context for who you are. You'll find that they make a lot fewer changes than they would if it were just in essence, somebody in a solitary room without any idea of who you are or what you're trying to accomplish. So usually some kind of conversation, almost an interview, is important first. And a lot of editors will want to have some kind of an induction interview where they talk to you and figure out who you are and decide, or help understand, not decide, what your voice is and what you're really looking to accomplish in the work. Authors like that more than editors, but editors will ask for it sometimes. The process of editing is really important for anybody. Basically, we all know what blogs are. Well, blogs were established as non-edited pieces of writing so that people could just put something up. It's short for web log, and a log, L-O-G, really refers to something that someone is doing when they're journaling. When you're writing a journal or a diary or an original work, you're doing it without somebody editing it. And a blog is supposed to be that. But blogs are notoriously badly written. Nobody has seen them until they come up on the internet, and a lot of people can't stand to read some people's blogs just because they're so poorly constructed. Editing removes the blog sense from your book, and I think that's really important.
Well, that's good. Lots of good advice here and good information. I think we probably should wrap it up. Next time we will talk about blogs and other kinds of publications. So that'll be our next topic. So that was a good segue.
Unintentional, but I'll take it.
Anything else anybody wants to add? Last words before we cut it off? Or
I always see an author who's willing to be edited has taken a big step toward, I think, publishing a book that will be accessible to other people. You're giving up a little bit of control, but what you gain from a good editor is immeasurable. You can't imagine how much better your book can be, even with small changes, when an editor who's not self-interested in the publication like you are is helping you out and has no agenda other than just to make your work better. So I think it's a bold step for any author to take, any writer really.
Yeah. But it really can be a win-win if
You
you
agree?
get the right editor.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, at the very least, I wouldn't publish a book without some, at least the grammatical line editor. You know, I'm pretty good, but you know, write 100,000 words, it's really easy to lose the, you know, the, in this case, the trees for the forest instead of the other way.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for being with us tonight again. This was great. This was number 3. Next week we'll do, like we said, other types of publications like blogs and podcasts and things like that. We'll talk about those. So thanks again, and we will see you